Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The living room was quiet, the kind of quiet that made every breath feel heavier. The clock ticked somewhere in the background, but all I could hear was the faint rustle of him moving closer. I sank into the couch, trying to focus on the show playing softly on the screen, but my heartbeat betrayed me, faster, louder, almost as if it wanted to be heard. He didn't say a word at first. Just a slow, deliberate movement as his hand brushed lightly against my knee, sending a spark that made my breath catch. My fingers curled against the cushion, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I should lean back or pull away. But then his eyes met mine, steady, unblinking, searching. That look alone had a weight to it, one that made the air between us feel warmer. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips, the kind that knew exactly what it was doing. "You look tense," he murmured, his voice low enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "I'm fine," I managed, though my voice sounded thinner than I wanted it to. He tilted his head, as if testing my answer, and in the next heartbeat, he shifted, slowly, deliberately, placing himself between my legs as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My breath hitched, and the warmth of him so close sent a flutter through my stomach I couldn't quite explain. For a moment, neither of us moved. His hands rested lightly on the couch, one on each side of me, but not touching. Just close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin, close enough that the space felt charged, almost fragile. "Still fine?" he asked, his voice a whisper now, teasing but with a hint of something deeper. I didn't answer. Couldn't. My fingers twitched as the room seemed to shrink around us. The TV flickered in the corner, forgotten. And then, the sound of his phone vibrating against the coffee table cut through the silence. He didn't move, didn't look away. His eyes stayed locked on mine. The question hung there, unspoken. Would he reach for it, or stay right here? The sound of the phone finally stopped, leaving the room in that same fragile quiet as before. I shifted slightly, trying to break the tension, but the warmth between us lingered, like a whisper neither of us was ready to speak aloud. It hadn't always been like this charged silence, this hesitancy. There was a time when evenings meant effortless laughter, when a touch wasn't loaded with meaning, and when closeness didn't feel like unfamiliar territory. Somewhere along the way, between late nights at work and mornings spent scrolling through our own separate worlds, we had let the space between us grow without noticing. He noticed now. I could see it in his eyes, a kind of searching, maybe even regret. His thumb brushed against the cushion, a nervous habit he never had before. "Do you ever wonder," he said softly, "when it started to feel like we're visitors in each other's lives?" I swallowed hard. The words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. "Maybe we just stopped asking each other what we needed," I whispered back. His jaw tightened, then softened, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the room was holding its breath with us. He leaned in just slightly, close enough for me to catch the faint scent of his cologne, the same one he used to wear when everything between us was effortless. There was something else in his eyes now, something unspoken. Perhaps a desire to bridge what had been lost, or maybe a question he wasn't sure he should ask. His hand hovered near my knee again, not quite touching this time, just waiting. The tension wasn't just in the space between us, it was in the memories too. The vacations we planned and never took. The words we left unsaid because they were easier to ignore than to confront. The nights when he would reach across the bed and I, too tired or too distracted, would turn away thinking there would always be time to fix it later. Later had become now. "I don't want to keep missing it," he said finally, his voice steady but low, as if any louder might make me pull away. I didn't answer right away. My fingers brushed against his this time, not fully, not a promise, but a trace of what used to come so easily. And in that small, charged pause, something shifted. Not resolved, not yet, but stirred awake. Then, just as quickly, the sound of rain against the window pulled our eyes away from each other. The world was still moving, even if we were standing still. The rain outside deepened into a steady rhythm, filling the spaces our words had left empty. He was still close, closer than he had been in weeks, his presence a quiet storm that made the air heavy and warm. I could feel the weight of his gaze, not casual, not curious, but searching, almost desperate. "You've been different lately," he said quietly, his thumb now tracing slow circles near my knee, just enough to make my pulse trip over itself. "Different how?" I asked, though I already knew what he meant. His eyes flicked to the phone still resting on the table, the screen now dark but its presence loud. "Like your mind somewhere else." "Someone else." The words landed between us like a challenge, unspoken but sharp. I inhaled, trying to steady myself. There was no accusation in his tone, not really, but there was something else, a fear he hadn't voiced before. "I'm here," I said, softer than I meant to. "But I don't think you've really looked at me in a while." That made him pause, his jaw tightening. The air felt warmer suddenly, charged with something we hadn't allowed ourselves to admit. We were both guilty of letting the distance grow. And yet, in this moment, it was that very distance that made the closeness now feel dangerous, like we were standing at the edge of something neither of us was sure we should cross. He shifted forward, the space between us now barely a breath. His fingers brushed my thigh this time, lingering just long enough to make every nerve in me aware of it. "I notice now," he said, voice low, almost daring. A part of me wanted to pull back. Another part didn't. The flicker of jealousy in his eyes wasn't just about someone else. It was about all the nights I had pulled away, all the moments I hadn't reached for him. It was about the thought of losing what used to feel so certain. And in that fragile, heated silence, it felt like one wrong word, or one bold move, could break everything wide open. The rain had turned into a downpour now, drumming against the windows as if the world outside wanted to drown out what was happening inside. The house felt smaller, quieter, like the air itself was holding its breath. He hadn't moved far, and neither had I. Every step he took seemed to draw an invisible line closer, one I wasn't sure I wanted to erase but couldn't stop thinking about. The flicker of the TV light danced across his face as he leaned in just slightly, enough that I could feel the heat of his breath against my skin. My heart hammered, not just from the nearness, but from everything behind it. The unspoken nights. The missed touches. The words we hadn't dared to say. "Tell me you don't feel it," he whispered, his hand now resting on the armrest behind me, caging me in gently without force, only presence. I didn't answer right away. My fingers brushed his, and the world seemed to shrink down to that single point of contact. There was nowhere to escape, and strangely, I didn't want to. Lightning cracked somewhere in the distance, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the house shifted with us, the low hum of the storm wrapping around the moment like a secret. "I don't want to keep pretending we're fine when we're not," he said, voice steadier now, eyes locked on mine. "I want to know where we stand, right now." His words hung heavy in the room, and with them came a pull, slow, magnetic, undeniable. I could feel every inch of the space between us begging to disappear. My breath caught as his hand finally moved, not boldly, but with purpose, brushing against my side, tracing a path that made my pulse jump. The rain grew louder, the storm outside relentless. And just as he leaned in, just as the world felt ready to collapse into that one inevitable moment, a knock at the front door shattered it all. We both froze. The knock at the door echoed through the house, sharp against the storm's constant murmur. We both froze, the moment we'd been teetering on suddenly split open. My heart still raced from how close he had been, the heat of him lingered like an aftertaste I wasn't ready to lose. He glanced at the door, jaw tense, but didn't move immediately. His fingers were still near my side, and I felt that hesitation ripple through him like a secret trying to decide whether it should stay hidden or not. "I should get that," he said finally, but his voice was low, reluctant. Before I could answer, the knock came again, this time sharper, impatient. He pulled away, just enough for the warmth between us to cool, and walked to the door. I sat still, breath shallow, knowing that whatever waited on the other side wasn't going to be simple. When he opened it, the storm's breath swept in, carrying with it a figure I hadn't seen in weeks, her. His coworker. The one whose name I'd stopped asking about because the answers were always too casual, too vague. She stood there dripping from the rain, coat clinging to her frame, eyes darting past him straight to me. "Sorry to show up like this," she said, her voice thin, but there was nothing apologetic in the way she looked at him. He hesitated, blocking the doorway as though unsure whether to let her in. My stomach turned, not from the storm's chill, but from the sudden, sharp clarity settling in my chest. "I told you not to come here," he muttered, low enough that I almost didn't catch it. The room spun a little. I stood, the couch creaking as if echoing the shift inside me. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Neither of them answered at first. The rain filled the silence. She stepped forward, just slightly, and her words sliced through the room. "You said you needed time. I didn't realize you meant this kind of time." His shoulders stiffened. His eyes flicked to me, then back to her. Guilt, raw and unguarded, flickered across his face, and suddenly, the warmth I had felt from him earlier wasn't the same. The attraction, the closeness, the whispers of something rekindling, they had been real, but they weren't whole. And in that fragile moment, with the storm raging outside and the truth unraveling inside, I realized, something had already been broken long before tonight. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but the words never came. The storm outside showed no sign of easing, rain sliding down the windows like the room itself was weeping. The door was still open, cold air creeping in as the three of us stood in the living room, no words, just the weight of everything that had been hidden pressing down hard. "Close the door," I said finally, my voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the tension. He hesitated, then did as I asked, shutting out the rain but not the chill it left behind. The woman at the doorway, the one who shouldn't have been here, crossed her arms. "You told me you were ending it," she said, her tone almost daring him to deny it. I turned to him, my heart pounding. "Is that true?" His face was pale, eyes darting between us. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he muttered, as if the order of the mess mattered more than the mess itself. Anger surged, hot and trembling. So it was happening. He stepped toward me, hands raised slightly, not to touch, but to plead. "It was a mistake. I thought I wanted something else, but you wanted her," I snapped, the words cutting through the heavy air. The other woman looked down, guilt creeping over her expression now, as if she hadn't expected to be standing in the middle of what was left of us. "I should go," she said softly, and for once, I didn't stop her. The door closed behind her, leaving only the storm and the silence. He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time that night, I saw the cracks in him too. "I wanted you to notice me again," he said, voice rough. "I wanted what we used to have." Tears burned at the corners of my eyes, not from weakness but from the ache of what had been lost. "You broke us trying to fix us." The words hung there, and neither of us moved. The storm howled, the lamp flickered, and in that fractured quiet, the decision loomed: walk away, or somehow, start again. He reached out then, not to hold me, but to let his hand linger close enough to feel. "Tell me it's not too late," he whispered. I didn't answer, not yet. The storm had finally softened to a drizzle, the sound now a gentle backdrop instead of a roar. The living room, once thick with tension, felt strangely still. He stood a few feet away, his hands still lingering in the air between us, and for the first time in a long while, there was no anger left, only the ache of what almost slipped away. I exhaled, the weight of the night pressing against my chest, but beneath it, something else stirred, the truth that love wasn't always neat, but it could survive the mess if both hearts were still reaching for it. "You hurt me," I said, my voice steadier now, though softer. "You broke something I thought was unshakable." His eyes dropped, regret heavy in his posture. "I know. And I hate that I made you feel alone when all I wanted was for us to feel alive again." I stepped closer, my fingers brushing his, tentative at first, then staying there. "Then stop trying to fix us by breaking us," I whispered. "Start by being here. Really here." His breath caught, and for the first time all night, his shoulders eased. The storm outside faded to a hush, as if the world itself was listening to this quiet surrender. "I don't want anyone else," he said, his voice rough but real. "I want the nights we used to have. The mornings where we didn't need words. I want you to look at me like that again." I searched his face, the same face I had fallen for, the same one that had made mistakes, but also the one standing here now, asking for a chance to stay. My thumb brushed against his hand, and this time, I didn't pull away. Slowly, he stepped forward, wrapping his arms around me, not as a claim, but as a plea and a promise. My head rested against his chest, his heartbeat quick under my cheek, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself lean in. The rain outside softened to a whisper. The TV hummed in the background, forgotten. We didn't need grand words, just the quiet decision to hold on, to try again. His lips pressed against my forehead, warm and certain. "This time," he murmured, "we start from here." And in that fragile, beautiful moment, the night that began with a storm ended with something far more rare, a calm we built together.